Welcome to Camp Podcast Special Edition. I am pianist Eunmi Ko, and I serve as president of the Contemporary Art Music Project, or CAMP. CAMP is an organization that promotes innovative art music and collaborates with composers and performing artists. One of many activities we do is our podcast series. Our hosts explore a wide range of topics from marginalized composers and the music history to current collaborations. Camp is currently accepting acoustic works, electroacoustic works, and installation proposals for the annual festival Campground 23. Do you want your works to be performed by camp performing artists, to be choreographed by Tampa City Ballet, and to be displayed at Tampa-based gallery Tampa's Projects? Submit your work now. Go to www.contemporaryartmusicproject.org and learn more about Campground 23. Tonight, I am your host, and I am thrilled to talk with composer Robert McClure, one of the three winners of Campground 22 commissioning competition. Robert teaches at Ohio University as assistant professor of composition and theory. Hi, Robert. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here and talking to me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Just real quick before we get into the interview, I'll second the whole like campground. Please apply to it. It was a fantastic festival. Honestly, it was one of the best new music festivals I've been to in a long, long time. I mean, you got together a just all star list of performers, and almost all of them are coming back. So I know that this year's festival is going to be another really, really great one. So if you are a composer out there, apply.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we're
Yeah.
very excited. Yeah. Well, we can start with an icebreaker question, and it's always great to know about our guest personally. So,
Mhm.
I would like to know, how you became a musician and who really influenced you musically in your life when you grew up, and why composer.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say I came from a musical family per se. I mean, we definitely had the classical music was playing on, the record player or the sound system quite a bit. My mother was a pianist at one time. I mean, she was a first grade school teacher for 35 years, so she mostly like played piano when she was younger. We had a piano in the house, and I would say like around maybe 13 years old, I found her acoustic guitar that she had like from the 60s up in the attic. And that's kind of like that was my in to music, because that was right around the time where I was like starting to get into a lot of rock bands and stuff, and like I found this old guitar in the attic, and started to mess around with it and asked my parents like, "Oh, this is great, but I want an electric guitar." And they were like, "Yeah, why don't you take lessons on this first?" And then we can think about getting you something else. So I did. I got guitar lessons from this shop that was this music shop that was pretty close to my house, and just obviously showed enough of an interest, and that's kind of where music started for me, was wanting to just just be a rock star. So clearly that didn't happen. But that was also the beginning of me starting to write music. Like I think I got into playing guitar so I could play the songs that I was listening to at that time. That would have been like Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, Metallica, stuff like that. But it was also in that like real that sweet spot between like middle school, high school. I was writing poetry, and I started to write music to the poetry and started to write
Mm.
songs. So that's, the guitar was kind of the beginner of both being a musician and being creative with music in a way. Um, I didn't start playing a classical instrument until my sophomore year in high school, where I wanted to join the jazz band at school to play guitar, and
Mm.
several of my friends were in it, and they were like, "Oh, you should come join the jazz band." So I talked to the band director. His name was Robert Haddad, and he said, "Well, if you're gonna be in the jazz band, you have to also be in the concert band. That's the way it works. Can you play anything?" And I said, "No, I can play guitar." And he's like, "Here are some drumsticks." So
Mhm.
that's how I became a percussionist, and being a percussionist was what kind of that is what opened the door to being a professional musician. Because that's what I was. That was my instrument in undergrad, and I played a lot of percussion music in my master's degree. And learning percussion also kind of opened the door to starting to learn piano at some point. So
Mm.
it was like that guitar opened the door, but percussion allowed me to walk through it. Um, so, and to answer your last question, why composition? Why didn't just keep being a performer or something like
Mhm.
that? It was my band director. He was like the band director and orchestra director at the school. His main instrument was viola and violin. He also played
Mm.
clarinet, so he could do both roles really well. He Because of that, and he basically I started to take lessons in classical percussion at some point, get make me a little bit better,
Mhm.
just hand a guitarist a pair of sticks and see how it works. um it's probably not going to be good, but I started to get pretty good at percussion, and it was clear like I needed to kind of move up to a different teacher at that point, and I started studying with um there was just this connection that allowed me to get in touch with the Toledo Symphony's um, president and CEO, and also former timpanist at the time, Robert Bell. So I started taking lessons with Robert Bell. Instead of paying him for the lessons, he just
Mhm.
required that, like, oh, you should just come to the symphony. Like, you just buy season tickets to the symphony, and we'll give you this insanely discounted rate. You and your family just come to the symphony. And that was definitely a huge part of my early education, was just going to symphony concerts in lieu of like paying him for lessons. So anyway, during my senior year, my band teacher Robert Haddad, he unfortunately he died very prematurely.
Mhm.
And I, I went. Uh, I think it was the night of his funeral. We went to the funeral, and I came home that night, and I had already been kind of messing around with a notation software, kind of writing stuff that kind of sounded like film music.
Mhm.
But I went home that night and composed a piece for our combined band and orchestra in memory of him. We perform it on his memorial concert, which was actually my first like public um, performance of anything. And my teacher Robert Bell of the Toledo Symphony, he comes with the artistic director Merwin Sue, and they listened to the piece, and it just so happened the next year was the Toledo Symphony's 60th um, anniversary season. They were commissioning local composers to write 60 measure fanfares, and they asked me
Mm.
to do one of them. I was the youngest one to do it, so I like had a piece on like a classics, Toledo Symphony concert,
Great.
um, a brand new piece. So that was kind of, I know that's like an insane introduction to composition, but
Mhm.
that's kind of what made it look very possible to me,
Mhm.
that you know like these it gave me an early taste of success that
Mhm.
was a little bit contagious, and so my undergrad was actually in music education, but it was very clear to me that I wasn't really excited to be a band director. I wasn't excited to be an orchestra director. I wasn't really
Mm,
excited to play my instrument even that much. I was mostly just improvising and composing pieces for marimba with my friends, and it was at the end of my senior, well, the end of my junior year, beginning of my senior year, where I just decided, like, I think I need to explore this composition thing a little bit further.
mm,
And weirdly enough, my would-be mother-in-law really encouraged me to like go for a master's
mm.
in composition. Usually that doesn't happen. Your mother-in-law isn't supposed to be the one that's like, yeah, don't get a job, go further into debt, don't support my daughter. Those aren't the things that a mother-in-law says. So she was very, she was and still is extremely supportive, and like with all those factors kind of combined, I think that's what, like, that's why composition seemed like, yeah, you should do this.
Mm. Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, and it's so inspiring. I think it's so inspiring to a lot of young students. You have this interest, and it can take any kind of turn, really, and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, all kinds of possibilities. Yeah, well, you mentioned a little bit about you write poets, poems and poetry, and obviously that you are interested in this other kind of art forms, and other subjects and things, and that also inspire you or to write music, or interest you in musical way, I guess. So if you can talk about that a little bit more, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So like um there are definitely those composers out there that, take all their inspiration from music, like
Mhm.
they're or even not only just music, but maybe, they're like inner like feelings and thoughts and everything like that. And for me, that has never made a ton of sense for my creative practice. um Actually, up until recently, weirdly enough. But for a long time, I was always looking outside of music to become inspired to write music. And I've always, I've described it a lot as like, I see the world with composer glasses. Like
Mm,
you can be, learning something about nature or looking at visual art and see something, and it immediately, kind of triggers a response in your musical brain, like, oh, a connection is made, and
mm,
you can see that thing or observe this phenomenon or whatever and immediately get a musical idea from it. So yeah, that's what I've been doing for a long time. My dissertation orchestra piece from when I was at Rice University was inspired by the concept of mimicry in plants and animals. That how, certain butterflies through evolution will change their what's called their warning colors, the like patterns on their wings, to mimic. If they are a harmless butterfly, they will mimic a like poisonous butterfly, so that birds will leave them alone. Or there's also this octopus called the mimic octopus that can change its shape, change its patterns, to mimic, a poisonous sea snake, or a lionfish or something like that. So as I was learning about all of these, this concept of mimicry in the animal world, this immediately suggested like some musical ideas as well. So that piece is called, that orchestra piece is called Warning Colors. So you know I have a lot of different pieces that are inspired by like animals or plants or the
mm,
natural world, or even other poetry or something like that. It's I don't know why, but like I'm just I'm not one of those composers that looks inward for musical ideas. I'm always looking outward for them. So like the piece that was on Campground this past year,
Right.
Flora,
Yeah.
is another one of those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a saxophone duet that I wrote for the Deco Ensemble. They're from Fredonia, New York, and it I got in touch with them because of my association with the Adjective New Music Composer Collective. I'm in that collective, and I also do the Lexical Tones podcast that comes out from Adjective New Music. And it was right at the beginning of the pandemic in March 2020. All of our performances were canceled. Who knows when live music was going to come back
Mm-hmm.
again? And like I had a really really good spring of 2020 planned out. Like I was in like 5 or 6 more festivals after March, and of course all of them were canceled. And
Yeah.
it was a very depressing time. Like I had a piece that I
Mm-hmm.
was working on for flute quartet. I just kind of stopped because I was like, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
When is this ever going to get performed? And it was then that Deco, they were putting on these like online lunchtime concerts, maybe just like 30 minutes from their house on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a saxophone duo. They were there's certainly some rep out there, but they wanted to add to their specific repertoire, and they contacted Jamie Lee Sampson and Andrew Martin Smith of the co-owners of Adjective. They're all of them are very good friends, and just said like, hey, do any of the Adjective composers want to write for us for these like kind of online concerts? And I was like, yes, absolutely, because this has a tangible deadline and it is going to have a premiere.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard for me to write something just kind of on spec, like
Mm-hmm.
not knowing if it's ever going to be performed. So and it's also really really hard for me to not write for people that I actually know. And
Mm-hmm.
so Jacob Swanson and Sarah Marchitelli, they're the Deco Ensemble. They're a married couple. We got on a Zoom and we just kind of started talking about ideas. And yeah, that was kind of the beginning of this piece, Flora. And we had talked about like, I kind of want to do miniatures. That seems like kind of low stress. I can just each one is it's I only need to have one idea. I don't need to put a lot of pressure on myself, considering the immense pressure we were all under in March and April of 2020, like just complete uncertainty of what was going to happen in the world and
Mm-hmm.
everything like that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do miniatures. I'm thinking like 6. I've done many different pieces of miniatures. I love the miniature format. Um, but with all of my other miniature pieces, there's always some kind of concept that holds them all together. Like I have a piece for solo piano called Desert Miniatures, and it's like different kind of ideas or scenes from the desert when I lived there when I was going to the University of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
I have another. I have a piece for like a mixed ensemble, which is just called Five Miniatures, which is all based on certain lines from Allen Ginsberg's poem Howl, and other ones too. So I was like, okay, I need to have something that pulls this all together. So at the time, my oldest daughter, who's now 8 and in 3rd grade, she was in kindergarten, and they had just switched to going to kindergarten online. You can imagine how much of a nightmare
Mm-hmm.
kindergarten online is. um, and she had to do this art thing, this like little art project where she had to watch some videos about color theory. And one of the videos was like an OK Go music video where they do all kinds of like crazy colors, and it was awesome. And I was just like doing, helping her with it and doing it with her. And I was like, oh, okay, well, theory. I thought I was going to have 6 miniatures, and they're, 3 primary and 3 secondary colors. Like, that's something. But it wasn't enough. So my wife, ever since we moved back to the States, having been in China for 4 years before we got back here,
Mhm.
she has like filled our house with plants, and
Mm.
she has just become like so interested in like finding these crazy plants and like propagating them and everything. And like, I was just kind of like meandering around the house not knowing what to do, because it's like, what can you do, we're stuck at home. And I was just like looking at a lot of these plants, and I was like, hmm, there's something. So I just started researching like red, like plants with red flowers, plants with
Mhm.
blue flowers, something like that. And I found like the most interesting ones to me, and
Mhm.
used the like characteristics of each plant, or the um the image of each plant, or like how they grow, or even in one case, like the third movement is called the Bird of Paradise.
Mhm.
um it's a plant that is named after it. I mean, it looks like birds of paradise. So I like uh found different birds of paradise, used their bird calls as musical material, and the entire movement is like basically made up of different birds of paradise bird calls. So
Mhm.
it was just a really fun piece to do, because it wasn't a lot of pressure. It had an actual performance, and I wasn't trying to like break new ground compositionally for myself. I was just like, I'm just going to do stuff that I've done before. It doesn't have to have like some big overarching theoretical statement that I'm making or anything like that. So yeah, it was just a fun piece, and then they performed it many times online. And yeah, it's finally starting to kind of get out into the world. And
Mhm.
on Campground,
Mhm.
Doug O'Connor and Catherine Weintraub, they just absolutely nailed it. It was a phenomenal performance, and they're actually the first duo to perform the piece, other than Jake and Sarah
Mhm.
in Deco. So yeah, it was like, yeah, it was great. I can't stress enough how much composers should apply to Campground. Seriously, like I was so impressed with that festival.
Thank you so much. Well, I mean, probably having not much pressure and just do whatever you want to do with music that produces the best outcome. I mean, we when we heard the piece, we were absolutely in love, and that's why it's a winning piece of Campground 22. So, well, let's listen to Flora. Here it's performed by the co-ensemble, Jacob Swanson and Sarah Marchitelli. So there's new premiere coming up with your new work because we commissioned a piece from you for saxophone, piano, and voice. And my body cells keep ticking. And we're gonna premiere this October 7th at
Hmm.
the USF Concert Hall with other winning pieces, including Dorothy Hyndman's piece. And John Pedro Oliveira, and there are also other composers' works on that program. Um, so obviously, I'm very curious about this work because I'm going to perform, and I started practicing, and it's great.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it. Yeah. So,
Awesome.
what did you really? What's your inspiration for this? And obviously, there's this poetry.
Yeah. So the poet of the work is Alex Ann Shaw. Way back when I was a master's student, I wrote my first set of art songs, and my professor at the time, I was worried because I was like, I chose some Sylvia Plath poetry, and I was like, is this okay?
Mm.
Like, this is still under copyright. And he was like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It wasn't fine. Uh, and I tried to get it performed again, and like actually with permission of the Sylvia Plath Foundation, they were like,
Mm.
no, you shouldn't have done it in the first place. What are you thinking? I was like, oh yeah, that's good advice. So ever since then, I made it my mission to, like, I'm only going to work with living poets. And
Mm,
I was doing another set of songs in the first year of my doctorate, and I just kind of went online to, I can't even remember what the website was anymore, but I was going through a lot of poets, and I found this poem by Alex Ann Shaw, and it just completely transfixed me. She
mm,
has, and as such, we have done, I don't know, I think this might be the eighth piece we've done together.
mm.
um because I've once I found her, I was like, yeah, I'm done, good, I don't need to look at other poets, because she and, like, I love her poetry. Her poetry has this edge to it. It's simultaneously uh exquisitely beautiful, it's economical, and also it toes this line between just abject beauty and almost horrifying imagery sometimes. Like, I did this piece with her called "Now Our Grief Is Put Away" for soprano and electronics, and the poetry is about the tsunami that hit Thailand, like Christmas Day of 2004. And it is some about that, but it's also about how she went to Thailand to, like, help with the relief effort, and was building houses, and like learning different parts about Thai culture, and learning how, like, the Thai mafia had put up this um like barbed wire, razor wire fence, to, like, take land away from the rightful owners of the land. And it was that razor wire fence that, when the water was coming rushing in, people were getting slammed against it and just cut apart.
Mm.
And
Wow.
like, she talks about that experience, learning about this. And the line in the poetry is, on a razor wire fence, their bodies sliced like soap. And
Oh,
it's,
God.
it's a horrifying image, but it's also, like, gorgeously written, and it's like it really gets at an emotional core. So I just fell in love with her work. And
Mm.
we've been collaborating for 12 years now, possibly more.
Wow.
And yeah, so when the commission came up, and you said, well, you can choose from this instrumentation, and of
Mm-hmm.
course, Jamie Jordan sang "Now Our
Mm-hmm.
Grief Is Put Away." She's sung it on several different festivals, and she's just been, an amazing collaborator and performer for years. So I was like, oh, well, you have Jamie Jordan, I want to write for Jamie again.
Mm-hmm.
um, so and actually, I wrote another piece for Jamie and her partner Dan, that also used Alex's poetry. So it just kind of made sense to go back to Alex and to get some new stuff. So yeah, I just kind of approached Alex and was like, hey, what do you have that's, like, brand new? Like, she has 3 books out, and I've read pretty much everything, and I'm just kind of wondering, like, where are you right now? And she sent me some stuff, and thematically, I started to see this kind of weaving thread between some of her poetry. And it was it, I interpreted it as, like, um kind of a reevaluation of self, in like, at as we get older, and a reevaluation of self in, like, as our bodies age, or as as we kind of, like, navigate through, like, the social media landscape, and, like, okay, well, I
Mm-hmm.
put this public face out there, but is that public face me? you know and those kinds of those kinds of like reevaluation of self later in life. And I'm as my friend Jamie Lee Sampson keeps reminding me, I'm approaching 40. So um, like we're getting to that point where that reevaluation is starting to happen, and it just seemed like uh, I I've always been drawn to Alex's work that is very descriptive of like that doesn't really look inward very much, and which I was talking about at the very beginning. Like
Mhm,
I don't usually look inward, but this was these poems was like, hey, this is something new. This is something new that I'm
mhm,
I'm drawn to about her work, and it was really exciting to kind of explore this. The very first, so it's three songs.
mhm,
The very first one actually doesn't go into that topic at all. It kind of juxtaposes this excerpt from a much longer poem of hers, where she's talking about organisms for whom the concept of I doesn't really make sense. Like we're talking about how like trees and mosses and fungus and these organisms that communicate with each other in these networks of releasing different chemicals, or different spore or something like that. And there's these like networks of organisms where they're not one. There is no I to these organisms. There is only a we, and that is a concept that right now in our like cultural and political discourse is maybe a bit foreign. There is
mhm,
so much emphasis on the I
mhm,
of uh our current reality, where you look at these other you look at these other organisms that don't have an I,
mhm.
that are only for the collective good, and it's like, I wonder if we could learn anything from that. So it's like the whole song cycle gets its name from the second song, which is called "And My Body Cells Keep Ticking." The first song is atoms hovering, or at what's it called? I can't remember. That's the problem. It's so new to me. I like I it's so new. It's something about like where atoms hover quivering. That's it. And
Mhm,
then the last one is just called disappear to sky.
mhm,
And it's got some really really beautiful imagery, that you know where the first song is very abstract, the last song is very at the like human emotional level. So yeah, it was really fun to just explore these topics musically, and use Alex's just phenomenal text. And yeah, I mean, I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, I can't wait to perform the whole thing and play with Jamie and Catherine. It's really exciting. Um, well, you actually mentioned quite a few times the Adjective New Music Composer Collective.
Mhm.
So, if you can tell us about the group, and you've also served as a host of a podcast
Yep.
for the group. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Adjective New Music was started as primarily a publishing company, which that's its main function. Um, and to say publishing company is, it definitely publishes works of several of the composers in the collective, namely Andrew Martin Smith and Jamie Lee Sampson. But also, it's uh, a distribution hub for other composers, mostly in the
Hmm.
collective, who self-publish their works. So
Hmm.
technically, I am self-published under the heading "Process Underway," and I distribute through Adjective New Music.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find a bunch of my a bunch of different pieces of mine on Adjective. Some are physical scores, some are digital score, some
Mm-hmm.
have electronics, some are purely acoustic. But that's how Adjective the company got started. Adjective New Music was started by Jamie and Andrew, I believe, when they were in grad school, mostly as a performing group. They had like the Adjective trio. That Jamie Lee Sampson plays bassoon, Andrew Martin Smith plays clarinet, and I believe they had an oboist that they were performing under. And of course, composers should definitely know Jamie Lee Sampson's bassoon multiphonic book. She has an excellent book that gives you like an enormous amount of information about bassoon multiphonics, including fingerings and sound files and all that stuff. And she's working on other books about the bassoon and in particular extended techniques. But when they asked me to be in Adjective, one of the original goals was to like, hey, we're gonna do like a blog and maybe a podcast. And I was like, I want to do podcasts. I call that right now. Because at the time I was still living over in China, and I was feeling very disconnected from my own generation of composers. I really
Mm-hmm.
didn't know like who was doing what. I was even my friends. I kind of like it's difficult to stay in contact when you are literally 12 or 13 hours away from everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just decided like that was how I was going to get back in touch with my like with my like composer friends and musician friends. So we started the podcast in I believe 2016, and the first interviews were just the first members of the podcast. Then I started to kind of go around to my other friends who were composers that I wanted to interview. And at a certain point, I started like, well, okay, but what's the future of this? Like, I only have so many friends that I can interview for
Mm-hmm.
this. And it was actually pretty early on when I decided, like, okay, I'm gonna have to do research. Like, I'm gonna have to find people that I want to talk
Mm-hmm.
to for this. And I believe composer Amanda Feary was the very first like cold call I did to say like, hey, I found your music. I really like it. I'd love to talk to you about it. And she said yes. And we're at something like 183 episodes, and the vast majority of the composers that I've spoken to, I've never met personally. But
Mm-hmm.
it's been an excellent way for me to kind of like find new voices and new composers that are doing some incredible stuff. I've mostly kept
Mm-hmm.
it to like maybe my age plus 10 years or minus 10
Mm-hmm.
years, because I'm really interested in finding those people out there that they're too young to have had an article written about them. They're too young
Mm-hmm.
to have had a big like whatever about them. And it's like they're doing really meaningful great work here. People should know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like and it's a podcast. It's a new music podcast. I understand that no worlds are going to be changed by this. But if even like, a couple people say, "Oh man, I've never listened to them," and they write really cool stuff and they're like really interesting to listen to, like speak about their music. That was kind of always just the goal for the podcast, was just to like meet cool people, listen to cool music, and have interesting conversations.
Great. And they're on SoundCloud, correct? And we can
Adjective.
still
You can
listen
find
to.
Adjective. Yeah, you can find the Lexical Tones podcast on SoundCloud. You can also find it on Apple Podcasts, or you can find it on
Okay.
Stitcher. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Totally have to check that out. Well, you are also a dedicated teacher. You're holding a teaching position at Ohio University. So, um, how's been working with young students, young composers, and I wonder if you have any wisdom you want to share with younger generation of musicians.
Yeah, so this is the beginning of my sixth year at Ohio University. I
Mhm.
actually just pressed send on the the tenure portfolio just yesterday.
Yay!
Yeah, so clearly I like it here, and I would love to stay. It's been really wonderful working with my composers here. When I came in, uh, we had maybe like 9 or 10 composers.
Mm,
In a couple years, we had doubled the studio
mm,
in numbers, and we were starting to work with some really, really excellent young composers. One of whom just like he went through his master's at OU. He did a doctorate, and now he's got his first like full time teaching job at a university. Ryan Seisky, just
yeah, great.
um, he's so we like I've it's really fun to work with younger composers because I'm not trying to make little me's.
Mm,
That doesn't sound like fun at all. Of course, like I have things that I've been doing for years that can possibly benefit them, but at the end of the day, it's like when I'm working with composers, I want to like meet them where they're at and just try to make them better at what they're trying to do. So that's an aspect of uh, having a composition studio and working with young composers that I'm really proud of. That my composers don't sound like me, and they don't sound like each other either. They're
mhm,
each just trying to be the most original version of themselves
mhm,
that they can be. With me, just kind of like um, steering the ship a little bit and saying like actually, it was in my doctorate when one of my professors, I was going in for like an advising meeting, and he asked me at the very beginning of the doctorate, like, okay, for music history, what don't you know? And I
mhm,
said, oh, well, I barely know anything about opera. And he was like, great, you're going to take opera classes. And it's kind of the
mhm,
same way with my composers. It's like, okay,
mm,
what do you do? What do you do well? Oh, I do
mhm,
this well. Great. We're going to learn the other stuff now
mhm,
because I'm just going to like push you into the other stuff. And especially for undergrads, it's so important to just like learn everything. You can figure out what
mhm,
sticks later. You
mhm,
know, you ask like, do I have any advice for like young musicians or anything?
mhm,
That is the advice. Just learn
mm,
stuff. You absolutely never know what is going to be useful later and what you can draw on that you didn't think, oh, I'm never going to use this. Well, maybe you will.
right,
So
right.
it's like just as a student, don't worry about specializing too early. Don't worry about like, oh well, I'm 22 years old. I've already got to be like a video game composer or something like
Mhm,
that. It's like no, just
mhm,
be a composer. Just be a good composer first, just be a good musician first. Like that is the only goal. Music is a lifetime. I think that people get way too caught up on being successful immediately, landing that
mm,
whatever immediately. And it's like
mm,
the humanities, music, art, a it is a winding road, it is uncertain, and as a musician, as a composer, as a performer, you want to be able to have as many skills as humanly possible before you go out
mhm,
into that world and have to rely solely on those skills. So it's like the composers that come to me and say, "Oh, I want to be a video game composer." It's like, "Great. That's a wonderful goal to have. Let's just make you good first." Okay?
mhm,
Like, let's make you good at many different aspects of composing music or performing music or whatever because you never know what you're going to have to rely on once you get out there. Um,
mhm,
I mean, my own story is case in point. I went to school for music education. I am not teaching band or
mhm,
orchestra or general music. Like you never know how it's going to go. So, like as a young person, just have a thirst for learning stuff. Just be excited about learning stuff. And yeah, it's going to be hard. And yeah, some days it's going to be like, I don't want to do this. I'm tired,
mhm,
whatever. But if you can wake up more days than not, just like, yes, I get to learn something new about music, you'll be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Great. Well, thank you so much for, you know, all this and talking to me and talking to our audience. We usually close the show with music.
Mhm.
So I think we can say bye now and then listen to your piano and electronic piece. It's fixed media, right? Piano with fixed media piece
It's
for
actually
elec
live
it's the live
electronics.
electronics.
Um,
Oh, cool.
it's a
Oh,
lot of fixed media, but there are also live electronics. So I just call it piano and electronics.
okay. So piano and electronics Bloom. It's performed by Justin Snyder. Thank you so much. Again, yeah. And yeah, I'll see you in person actually very soon in October, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. This was really fun.
Thank you. I'm excited to announce that as our podcast continues to explore a wide range of topics, we have decided to put all our series into one. Please make sure you're subscribed to Camp Podcasts to make sure that you receive all what we have to offer from Lost Time and Play the Ink, Piano Talk, and beyond. Support us by donating. You can go to our website www.contemporaryartmusicproject.org and simply click the donate button. Help us continue our podcast, festival, and other exciting projects. Thank you for listening. I will see you next time with more music.